Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow plans to station tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus. The United States says it's seen no indication that Russia will use any nuclear tactical weapons. Plus, NATO, Lithuania, and Germany, EU, the Ukraine, and the international organizations campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, reacting to Putin's announcement. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia has not created a military alliance with China and does not threaten countries. The comment follows Chinese President Xi Jinping's three-day visit to Moscow last week, which was closely watched for signs China might step up support for Russia. Now, the U.S. administration maintains China has been providing non-lethal assistance to Russia through its companies. Speaking during a TV interview, President Putin also accused the West of starting to build a new axis similar to the ones built by fascist Germany and militaristic Japan.
It does not correspond with reality at all. We are not creating any military alliance with China. Yes, we have cooperation in the sphere of military technical interaction. We are not hiding this. Everything is transparent. There is nothing secret. We have military cooperation. We conduct drills, not only with China, but even with other countries as well. They are announcing that they will create global NATO. What's that? Great Britain and China, at the start of this year, in January, I think, have signed an agreement on developing relations and mutual development in military area. That is why Western analysts, not us, are talking about the West starting to build a new axis similar to one created in the 1930s by the fascist regimes of Germany and Italy and militarist Japan.
Запад начинает строить новую ось, наподобие той, которая была создана.
Meanwhile, President Putin says Russia has struck a deal with neighboring Belarus to station tactical nuclear weapons on its territory, but will not violate non-proliferation agreements. The Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, had long raised the issue of stationing tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, which borders Poland. Now, the announcement comes at a time of growing tension with the West over the Ukraine war and as some Russian commentators speculate about possible nuclear strikes.
Наших переговоров с Александром Григорьевичем Лукашенко с Беларусью.
As for our negotiations with Alexander Grigorovich Lukashenko with Belarus, the pretext was the statement of the British Defense Secretary that they were going to deliver depleted uranium charges to Ukraine. It is still connected with nuclear technologies. It is obvious. However, even out of context of those events and this statement, Alexander Lukashenko has been bringing up the question of deploying Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus for a long time. Listen, we're your closest allies. Why do the Americans deploy the nuclear weapons at their allies on their territory, train the crews, pilots, how to use this type of weapon if needed? We agreed that we will do the same without violating our obligations. I emphasize, without violating our international obligations on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. We have already helped our Belarusian colleagues to modify their aircraft, the aircraft of Belarusian Air Force. 10 aircrafts are ready to use this type of weapon. We have already transferred to Belarus our well-known, very effective missile complex Iskander. It can be a delivery vehicle as well. On April 3, we will start training the crews. On July 1, we will finish the construction of the special repository to store the tactical nuclear weapon in Belarus.
The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, As expected, reactions have been trailing that announcement. The international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons has called President Putin's statement as extremely dangerous escalation. It says, quote, in the context of the war in Ukraine, the likelihood of miscalculations or misinterpretation is extremely high. Sharing nuclear weapons makes the situation much worse and risks catastrophic humanitarian consequences. This activity, hosting another country's nuclear weapons, is prohibited under the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which remains the only multilateral legal instrument to comprehensively ban any activity related to nuclear weaponry. It also says any nuclear weapon use puts populations in grave danger, and there is no humanitarian response mechanism in the world that can handle it. Similarly, NATO spokesperson Juana Lungescu calls Russia's nuclear rhetoric dangerous and irresponsible. Lungescu says, quote, NATO is vigilant and we are closely monitoring the situation. We have not seen any changes in Russia's nuclear posture that will lead us to adjust our own. Adding that Russia's reference to NATO's nuclear sharing is totally misleading, referring to President Putin's claims that his move will merely mirror those of Western nations that are already happening. Now, she said, NATO allies act with full respect of their international commitments. Russia has consistently broken its arms control commitments, most recently suspending its participation in the New START Treaty. Russia must return to compliance and act in good faith, in her words. Meanwhile, White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says the United States has seen no sign that Russian President Vladimir Putin was preparing to use nuclear weapons. The U.S. has given a cautious reaction to Russia's plan to station tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, saying it will continue to monitor the implications. He also says they're weighing in on Russian-Chinese relations following the president of China's visit to Moscow.
I can tell you that we've seen nothing that would indicate Mr. Putin is preparing to use tactical nuclear weapons in any way whatsoever in Ukraine. And I can also tell you that we haven't seen anything that would cause us to change our own strategic nuclear deterrent posture. We don't characterize it as an alliance either. I think, for all the bluster about a no limits relationship, I mean, there clearly are limits to what President Xi has proven he's willing to do in terms of bolstering up Mr. Putin. Now, look, these are two nations that see common cause in pushing back on American leadership around the world and leadership of the West, leadership of NATO. And so they are sort of using one another to chafe and to bristle at American leadership around the world. But it remains to be seen, how much of a true alliance we have here. These are two nations that want to challenge the international rules-based order. In one case, China, they actually have the resources and capabilities to mount an effective challenge. President Putin sees that. He knows that. And that's, we believe, why he's cozying up a little bit more to President Xi.
More reactions now, this time from Lithuania's foreign ministry, which said it'll call for new sanctions against Russia in response to its plans to station tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. According to a statement, the ministry said this will be part of its discussions with its Euro-Atlantic partners on how to respond to Russia and Belarus' latest plans, and call it yet another attempt by two unpredictable dictatorial regimes to threaten their neighbors and the entire European continent. The statement adds these are desperate moves by Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko to create another wave of tension and destabilization in Europe. These actions are dragging Belarus further into the war with Ukraine and into confrontation with the democratic world. Meanwhile, the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has urged Belarus not to host Russian nuclear weapons, warning of further sanctions for the Russian ally if it does allow Russia to deploy its weapons. Borrell said in a tweet, quote, Belarus hosting Russian nuclear weapons will mean an irresponsible escalation and threaten European security. Belarus can still stop it. It's their choice. The EU stands ready to respond with further sanctions. On the other hand, Ukraine's foreign ministry calls President Putin's statement yet another provocative step that undermines nuclear disarmament efforts and the international security system as a whole. The ministry said in a statement which partly reads, despite the horrific crimes against humanity and war crimes that the Kremlin is committing in this war of aggression against a sovereign state, Russia is demonstrating its inability to win on the battlefield. Ukraine appeals to the Belarusian society to prevent implementing criminal intentions of deploying nuclear weapons in Belarus in violation of its obligations under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which will further turn the country into a Kremlin hostage and cause catastrophic consequences for its future. Kyiv also appealed to the Group of Seven, G7 alliance, and the European Union to warn Belarus authorities of the long-term consequences should they accept the weapons on their territory. Ukraine is expecting the United Kingdom, China, the United States, and France, which are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, to have a particular responsibility to prevent threats of aggression using nuclear weapons to act to counter the Kremlin. Meanwhile, Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, says statement by the Russian President Vladimir Putin shows he is afraid of losing. Podolyak said on his official Twitter account, Putin is too predictable. Making a statement about tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, he admits that he is afraid of losing and all he can do is scare with tactics. He once again states his involvement in the crime violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Belarus, which is west of Russia on Ukraine's long northern border, is among Moscow's closest allies. It helped Russia launch its initial invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, allowing the Kremlin's troops to enter the country from the north. Staying with the comments from Russia, Germany has condemned the decision by Russian President Vladimir Putin to station tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, bringing the arms closer to the European Union. Now, an official of the German Foreign Office says the announcement was another attempt at nuclear intimidation by Russia. Putin justified the move, saying there is nothing unusual here. Either the United States has been doing this for decades. They have long placed their tactical nuclear weapons on the territory of their allies. Now let's speak with Mr. Alexei Ishak, head of sector at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, a comprehensive research body of Ukraine, joining us from Dnipro in Ukraine. You're welcome to the program this morning.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ishak. Very good to see you. Let's begin with this nuclear deployment of weapons in Belarus decision by President Putin. And if you will, let's look at how big a threat nuclear weapons are. If we cast our minds back to the discovery or creation of the hydrogen bomb and the atomic bomb, which preceded the surrender of Japan during World War II, which war President Putin has made reference to, but this time turning it on its head and calling the Ukrainian effort and the Western effort to stop the war an Axis attempt, that it will in all ways, that is the nuclear weaponry, obliterate and far extend the devastation that could have been caused by the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb. And you remember that Japan suffered for generations after that atomic bomb was deployed in Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Sorry, the sound for me is very poor, and I can only understand that it's a question about Putin's decision on nuclear weapon. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. If you can hear me, can I rephrase and shorten it real quick? So Putin is threatening to station nuclear weapons in Belarus, and we know how terrible nuclear weapons are. Comparing them to the devastation caused by the hydrogen bomb, by the atomic bomb, how terrible is this is this weapon?
Okay.
I know you're not a nuclear physicist, but just give us an idea for our viewers' sake how terrible this will be.
Okay, it's maybe some my reaction on these developments. First of all, Ukraine lives with this threat of nuclear attack for a year, maybe. The first threats by Putin to use nuclear weapons was announced the same time as he announced conventional military attack on Ukraine. So from that time to now, these threats became more and more ridiculous. And what is going now, I don't think it's too serious now. Yes, nuclear weapons is serious threat, but not in this case. And there are military calculation that nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, cannot change development of this war. And if compare effect of nuclear weapons, for example, in Hiroshima, and the effect of using tons of conventional bombs in Mariupol, for example, it's almost the same. Of course, without radiation, but devastation almost the same. So I don't think that Ukraine would very impressed with using of nuclear weapons against us. But in this case of Putin announcement of nuclear weapons in Belarus, I don't think it's really seriously, because Putin says now that it will not be Russia who would start nuclear war, but it will be Belarus who would start a nuclear war. And he says that everything he is doing now is on request from Alexander Lukashenko, leader of Belarus. So I don't think it's too serious. Yes, it's escalation. Yes, it's serious. Yes, international community have to watch closely on what is going on, but I don't think it will change development of this war and would change prospect of this war.
Yes, you are correct. That happens to be the reaction of the Ukrainian people or the government concerning this, as stoking the flames and adding another layer to the threats by Russia. But this time it involves actually deploying these weapons. Should it happen and those weapons actually begin to be assembled in Belarus, we understand why Poland, Lithuania, and the countries bordering Belarus and Moscow and Ukraine have reservations about this. Do you think that Belarus will heed the advice of Ukraine not to allow Russia station those weapons, given that they were the ones that acted as the Achilles heel for Ukraine by allowing the Russians use their northern border?
As I understand your question, it's about whether it's possible to prevent the deployment, yes or no? The question is whether we can prevent this deployment or not. So, if it's about prevention, I think when it really happened, this relocation of nuclear weapons from Russia to Belarus, I believe reaction will be very decisive and very effective, not only from Ukraine, but also from international community. And if we think about possible places of allocation of nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory, it is almost in zone of it's on distance that can be reachable for Ukrainian weapons. And I believe, in fact, it's almost impossible to stay nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory without very severe reaction on behalf of Ukraine and other countries. So it's too early to say now whether it's possible. Putin now announced only possibility to possible deployment of nuclear weapons. He says that on 1st of June it would be possible to deploy, but he did not announce any deployment. And we now everything is prepared now for decisive developments on battlefield. I believe by the time when it will be possible for Russia to deploy nuclear weapons in Belarus, it would be too late to do anything, because destiny of this war would be already decided on the battlefield. So I don't think that it's time now to be feared about it. We have to be prepared, but when it happened, and if it happened, I believe the problem would be solved without real deployment of Russian nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory. To me, it seems just impossible.
Yes, I understand your skepticism and your train of thought, but why do you think, well, obviously he's doing it as part of scare tactics to intimidate his opponents, that is President Vladimir Putin, and maybe it's because also he realizes how devastating the deployment of a nuclear weapon is. Again, I cast our minds back to the atomic bomb and World War II and the generational consequences of the deployment of the dropping of that atomic bomb. Remember the mushroom cloud, and remember the radiation effects that affected the Japanese for a very long time, maybe even to this day. So he's using it as a very visceral threat to force his opponents into a corner. But what final measure do you think the Ukrainians can do, or you can do, your people can do, to prevent this if they see it is beginning to happen?
Sorry, I hear almost nothing. I heard about nuclear mushroom, and is it question what would we do if we see nuclear mushroom or not?
No, that's not exactly what I was saying. But continue, Mr. Isaac.
Sorry. Well,
we apologize for the audio where you can't really hear what I'm saying.
I cannot hear. It's
yes.
My sorry, I can't hear. I hear
we do
you.
Apologize.
But if it's about nuclear mushrooms, to say if nuclear explosion happens of the yield like Hiroshima, it may be seen from 20 kilometers. But if you cannot see it, you know it from internet. So yes, it would be a big problem for Russia, for Ukraine, if it happens in some of Ukrainian cities. But another aspect is that neither Russia nor Belarus has reliable means of delivering nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons. After Ukraine had a lot of anti-aircraft defense and a lot of anti-missile defense, it would be very risky for Russia even to try to launch, and also for Belarus, even to try to launch tactical nuclear strike, because there is a big risk that it would not be effective, and even more that nuclear warhead may fell in Ukrainian territory without explosion, and it will be controlled by Ukraine. So it's very risky for Russia and Belarus even to try to do it, even when they have full preparation in terms of deployment. So I would just repeat, at this moment, it's just political irresponsibility on behalf of Russia to use this rhetoric about nuclear weapons, about deployment, about threatening the use of nuclear weapons. But in fact, I believe both international community and Ukraine are pretty good prepared to act if it really happens. So we have to keep calm. We have to warn Russia against any irresponsible behavior and keep and watch the situation and watch the moment when Russia may do anything with nuclear weapons, trying to redeploy it. But I don't think that it's effective in military terms, and it may make any effect on Ukrainian behavior in this war. It's impossible. This war will be won by Ukraine, even if Russia tries to threaten Ukraine with nuclear weapons.
And for all our sakes, I hope you are right. We hope and we pray that this threat remains just that and does not translate into reality. Thank you so much for your time, for speaking with us and your opinions on the issue. Mr. Alexei Ishak, the head of sector at the National Institute of Strategic Studies, a governmental research body of Ukraine in Dnipro. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
After the break, authorities urge residents to evacuate Ukrainian town as constant Russian attacks disrupt utilities. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Russian forces have increased airstrikes and cut off supply routes in Advidka, a town in eastern Ukraine where the situation continues to be difficult. Authorities in the Ukrainian town are urging people to evacuate as critical resources like mobile service and electricity are disrupted due to Russian shelling. Vitaly Barabash, the head of the Avdiivka military administration, says the town's utilities will be shut off as more and more of the town is shelled and destroyed daily. The town is being wiped off the face of the earth. In their words, you have to leave the town. We will evacuate utilities in several stages. The regional leader said mobile coverage for the town will be shut off too. He also cautioned that people will not be able to charge their phones because in the coming days there will be nobody to service the generators or run the mobile tower. The United Nations Human Rights Office said its investigation had confirmed thousands more civilian casualties in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including 21 people killed by Russian forces in executions or individual attacks. It found at least 5,987 civilians had been killed or injured between August 1st, 2022 and January 31st, 2023. A number it said was likely to be a significant underestimation, since it only covered those cases its investigators had been able to verify. Indiscriminate explosive weapons were responsible for a large number of civilian casualties, the report said, and its figures showed that at least 4 times more civilian casualties occurred in Ukrainian-held territory than Russian-held areas.
The war has come at a horrendous human cost. As of this week, we have documented more than 8,000 civilians who have been killed and almost 14,000 injured. More than 90% were caused by missiles, explosive weapons or mines, and explosive remnants of war. The actual figures are unfortunately considerably higher. In occupied areas of Ukraine, we have documented summary executions and attacks on individual civilians by Russian armed forces and the pervasive use of arbitrary detention and enforced disappearances. Since the 24th of February last year, we have documented 621 cases of enforced disappearances and arbitrary detention of civilians by Russian armed forces. Among the 127 that we interviewed after their release, 90% reported that members of the Russian security forces tortured and ill-treated them while in detention. In some cases, including with sexual violence. Since the 24th of February 2022, we have documented 91 cases of enforced disappearances and arbitrary detention committed by Ukrainian security forces. Of the 73 victims we interviewed, 53% had been tortured or ill-treated by members of Ukrainian armed forces and law enforcement agencies. We also documented transfers of civilians to areas in occupied territory or to the Russian Federation, some of which may amount to forced transfers or deportations. These transfers include children and adults who lived in social care institutions and unaccompanied children from parts of Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Kiev, and Odessa regions. While they were occupied by the Russian Federation or temporarily controlled by Russian armed forces.
Red Cross, ICRC, said some 10,000 Ukrainian civilians, many elderly and with disabilities, are clinging on to existence in horrific circumstances in and around the besieged city of Bakhmut. Russian forces have been trying for months to capture the city in Europe's bloodiest infantry battle since World War II.
Based on our understanding, there are several thousand residents still living in Bakhmut, and if you talk about the other communities around, the numbers would be coming closer to several thousand, possibly around 10,000 in the immediate vicinity of the areas around. And again, we recall to the respect of IHL for the civilians that are stuck there, currently living in very dire conditions, spending almost the entire days in intense shelling in the shelters, and for them to make their own choice to be able to survive and live in dignity and in safe space. People pushed to the very limit of their existence and survival and resilience in them. For these communities, the International Committee of the Red Cross recently delivered hygiene kits, solar lamps, containers, water containers, essential repair supplies, and handheld tools. These are the practical items that give them practical solutions to the problems they're facing every day. No matter how many times I've been there over near the frontline communities and areas over the past 13 months, I still feel the same shock as I visited those places the first time. Houses are crushed by military firepower, roofs are ripped off, apartment buildings are riddled with holes, chunks missing, the constant threat of unexploded shells, bombs underfoot, and some people still living in the shelters trying to survive these intense hostilities.
Now let's talk to Mr. Ambrose Ibuke, Chairman, Guild of Public Affairs Analysts, Enugu State Chapter. Thank you for making the time to be with us, and welcome to our coverage of Russian invasion this morning.
Good morning, Olumide. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This reminds me, not to mar fact with fiction, but of the old James Bond movies with Sean Connery and people like that as the stars, where there's a villain, despot, leader, or mad scientist who has his finger on the trigger of a nuclear weapon and wants to blow up the whole world, to be extreme, or wants to gain some traction internationally, which is what many of the earlier movies of 2007 were based on, the Cold War between the West and the East. But Vladimir Putin has now come to this juncture where he's saying that Belarus will be the port of call for the deployment of these nuclear weapons. And I'm asking you now, what do you think of his reference to World War II? Because he wants people to think about it. He's been very strategic in what he's saying. In that interview, President Putin was comparing the situation to Axis Germany and Japan and the allies, the UK, England, Britain, the US. So he's doing something, I'm thinking, that he wants people to think about how terrible World War II was, and that this may be a precursor to such a devastating event. Do you believe President Putin? Are you taking him at face value, or you think he's just making yet another threat?
There is what we call MAD, mutually assured destruction, which is a code by the world powers in terms of weaponry and in terms of weapons of mass destruction and the rest. What it means is that they all agree among themselves that they have what it takes in terms of the technology, the weaponry, and whatever it means to obliterate each other and as well obliterate the earth. So America was quick to dismiss Russia as bluffing. But in our profession, where we come to the media, that's what we call the grapevine. There's also what we call when you fly the kite. And there's also the popular saying that there's no smoke without fire. Increasingly, when Russia made the threat to enter Crimea, it was dismissed, but it happened. Russia also made the threat that if Ukraine goes a little bit further in its process of joining NATO, that it will react. We didn't take it seriously. It happened. Now, Russia is already, for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia is moving nuclear armament outside the Russian territory. This should call for concern and not the wave off of hand that the Americans are doing right now. They're trying to dismiss it as a non-issue. They're trying to dismiss it as it is, just bluffing of Vladimir Putin. But in the last 8 years or 9 years, since he started his aggression, we can see that he is gradually, he does what he says. So it should be taken seriously, more seriously by NATO. It should be taken more seriously by the United States of America. It should be taken more seriously by EU and the United Nations. Because the things Vladimir Putin said he will do, he has done. He invaded Crimea, annexed it. Nothing has happened to him till today. He has engaged in war in Ukraine because he said, according to him, that Ukraine is edging closer to joining NATO. And he's there for the past 1 year, and nothing has happened to him. So I think we should take him more seriously and try to see if we can avert. Because what he's trying to send to Belarus now is a tactical nuclear weapons. So the little ones that can be used in wars and the rest, they may not have the devastating effect that had in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World. That one, the nuclear warhead that can cause that kind of mass damage, is called strategic weapons of mass destruction, which is a nuclear weapon. So that he is not deploying the strategic nuclear weapon, he's deploying the tactical ones. And now he's fitting airplanes with those tactical warheads to be able to deploy nuclear weapons. And we are dismissing it with a wave of hand. We shouldn't. Rather, we should find a way of trying to end this war. The war is becoming protracted. The war is over a year now. And it is the Ukrainian people and the Russian people that are taking the heat, mostly. While the Americans sit in the Oval Office, they sit far away and pontificate and talk about that is bluffing. And they are bluffing and people are dying. How many Americans have died in the war? How many other parts of Europe have died in the war? But it's basically the Russians and the Ukrainians that are dying. So the earlier the solution is considered by these two countries, the better. Now, I want to go a little bit of put a background. Wars are fought because the weapons that were produced have to be used. Weapons are not produced to be exhibited in an art exhibition or to be exhibited in a gallery. Weapons are produced to fight wars. So as much as a human society keep producing weapons, especially devastating weapons for mass destruction, like the nuclear weapon, atomic bombs, and the rest, then they must find a way to use it. And the best way to use it is also by looking for areas where you can, trigger off a war. And that's what has been happening over the years. It happened in other fratricidal wars fought in Europe for over like 600 years. It happened in the First World War. It happened in the Second World War. And I don't even subscribe to calling these wars world wars. Europe is fond of starting a war, and then they try to bring other countries of other continents into the war and call it World War. When you check the histories of the wars, they're called World War. They're always European wars. They are European wars. European countries invading their brothers, invading other territory, and then they will bring in other countries and they call it World War. And we don't need those kind of needless wars right now. Okay, right now it's another European war. A European country, Russia, has invaded another European country, Ukraine. And now the Americans are coming into it. It's escalating. The Chinese are coming into it. Before you know, they will bring the war to Africa. We don't want that happening. We don't at all. So what we want is that this war should be brought to an end, because already the war is needless. It's a needless war. Each country should respect its own sovereignty and its own alliances, and let's have peace for the progress of the world.
Very good, Mr. Igboke. And I was just thinking, now, what then do you make of the posture, given everything you've just mentioned, as far as mediation and coming to terms with the reality of the situation on the ground is concerned, to end this war? What then do you make of the posture of NATO, who have not condescended in any way to President Putin or his threats, and who seem to have adopted a hard-line stance against Russia, making mediation efforts from them highly improbable, where people have to talk about the intervention of Turkey, of France, and of Israel? Because let me draw an analogy, a quick one. In hostage taking, if a hostage is taken by someone who you don't know from whence they come or what their mental situation is, usually they send in a hostage negotiator. Not because you are acceding to the demands of the hostage taker, but because you are preparing to make sure that the person who's been taken hostage is not harmed in any way. So you send in a negotiator, this is in law enforcement, of course, and you try and placate, if you will, do whatever you can to get the hostage away from, diffuse the tension in that situation. Do you think that the countries around Ukraine, NATO, for instance, America, on the other hand as well, are doing enough to diffuse these tensions?
No, I think it was even NATO that started the aggression. You remember that Vladimir Putin has complained that there was an agreement with what they had between NATO and Russia when the issue of one of those agreements was that NATO should not expand its membership to border towns or border countries in surrounding Russia. And that was a gentleman's agreement that has been respected for some years. But Vladimir Putin has complained that over the years and gradually, NATO has started having member states from across the, bordering the Russian Federation. And now, for them, giving advances to Ukraine to come into NATO, Russia sees this as an existential threat. And they made that very abundantly clear to the United States, who was pushing for this agenda of Ukraine joining. But he was ignored, and it was aggressively pursued. And he said that the only way he can retaliate was that to make a physical statement. And I think also Ukraine was not diplomatic about this. Ukraine was not wise enough about this. Ukraine should have been more mature in the way it's being used as a puppet by NATO. Because firstly, the neighbors, Russia, they are tied with cultural affinity, political affinity, and historical affinity over the years. So part of Ukraine speak Russia. So they are kith and kin over the years. Now you allow an outsider from far away American continent to start prodding you to be at war with your brother. So I feel that Ukraine has not been mature about this. They would have pushed for more diplomatic sources by inviting other countries like China, inviting others to actually mediate. And Ukraine always knows this, that Russia and United States of America have been always on a Cold War when it comes to diplomacy, when it comes to international rivalry and all those things over the years. You know, the Cold War era ended when we have the East Bloc and the West Bloc in the 70s. But again, it has been more political brinkmanship that has been going on and diplomatic shadowing that has been going on over the years. And Ukraine knows this, and that America and Russia are not friends. And you have Russia, the big brother in your neighborhood, and you're allowing America to, to use you as a pawn. Because as far as I'm concerned, Ukraine is just being used as a pawn in this game of wits between the United States and Russia. It's a proxy war that America is fighting. It's a proxy war Russia is fighting. And Ukraine is in the middle of it, allowing itself to be used as a chessboard to move these games. And that should not be allowed. The Ukrainian people should rise up and see how to end this war. Because the rhetoric from NATO is not a good one. Because why will it be a good one? NATO will push hard, will do hard stance, because basically it doesn't affect it in any way. It doesn't affect the countries. They are not directly hit by this war. They are far away. Their citizens are safe. Their infrastructure are safe.
Okay.
Life is going on normally over there. But it is Ukraine that is receiving the shelling, that is receiving the infrastructural damage, that is being the citizens are being killed. So, but again, I must give Emmanuel Macron of France has not, he has having the conciliatory over for some time over the last months, and it is people like that should, talk to the other leaders in NATO and see how to bring this war to an end.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective on the issues, which has been very clear. Thank you for your contribution to this issue this morning. And we do hope that even if it was a return to the Cold War, where it was espionage and trade wars and things of that nature, it'll have been better than this invasion. Thank you so much, Mr. Igboke. I'm speaking with, Mr. Igboke Ambrose, Chairman, Guild of Public Affairs Analysts, Enugu State Chapter. And when we return, Ukrainian helicopter pilot says Kiev needs newer attack helicopters and weapon systems to gain advantage over Russia on the battlefield. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Team of Sweden-based researchers have been using underwater robots to map levels of methane in the Baltic Sea after the leaks from the Nord Stream gas pipelines. Now, using remote-controlled submersibles called gliders, the group has been building a set of data they hope will help scientists judge the long-term impact of methane that has remained in the water after the leaks last September. The United Nations Environment Programme says the leak from the pipelines may have been the highest since single emission of climate-damaging methane, which is a greenhouse gas, far more potent but shorter-lived than carbon dioxide.
When we swap them around.
Everyone felt it was very important that we go out there and measure the methane levels and understand what was going on site, because we might want that data in the future to understand possible consequences. So we were lucky to work with these really nice instruments. They're called gliders. They're really good at staying in the water for long periods of time while collecting measurements continuously. So they take a measurement every second and they stay out there for over a month. We reacted very quickly and we went out there really to collect data for whatever purpose might be needed later. Let's say 2 years down the line, we see a decrease in fish populations. We'll want to be able to match that with methane to say, okay, maybe the methane affected reproduction in the fish.
Our studies that we are planning to publish will be one part of a puzzle to eventually map the impact of the methane on the ecosystem of the Baltic Sea. So first we need to answer the question, how much methane did get dissolved in the seawater after the leaks opened? How did it spread with the currents? How did it dilute in the Baltic Sea? And how far did it go and which concentration? So to answer this question, we are setting on the study that basis on observations and modeling at the same time. Concentrations of methane, there were several orders of magnitude higher than natural levels of methane in the seawater. And that could affect the ecosystem in different ways. We don't know that yet, but what we can do is we can provide a map. Where did the methane spread to? In which depth did it go? And in which concentrations did we have this? And we think this is a very important base for future studies when maybe more observations come in. How did the ecosystem respond? What were the observed changes that can base their works upon ours?
Now let's get down to brass tacks, as they say in business parlance, as we look at the business perspective of things with the invasion as a background. And Ini John Mekwa, my colleague and business correspondent, joins us. Good morning, Ini.
Good morning, Lumni. Thank you.
The Germany transport sector workers are staging a walkout.
Yes, why? Because of inflation. And I think they're grounding the economy today, 27th of March, beg your pardon, because of inflation. So we do know that the issue of energy, food and energy costs have been skyrocketing. We talked about the possibility of recession and we say, okay, I don't know, the economy has come over that. But the economy has not been able to get over the issue of energy costs, which has fed into food, because most of the gas used to come from Russia, the oil from Russia, and so with the sanctions and then Germany is, the biggest economy in EU, weaning itself off its Russian gas and Russian oil, then the supply now has to be managed. That's the supply of energy, sources of energy, natural gas and oil has to be managed.
From other countries.
From other countries and from their stock. Yeah. They've even had to build some extra pipelines where they're going to be getting from other countries, getting gas from other countries. But of course, what this has done is it has stifled the steady supply which the country had, and it has increased cost of energy, and that has fed into inflation. And so workers are saying we need more pay because our pay, our wages are not taking care of us as much as they used to. That's why they're doing this strike and walkout in Germany. And we know that, of course, this is going to feed back into the GDP figures, economy growth, and activities at the end of the day. We don't know how long this will last, but they're asking for increase in wage, which is not easy for the government on the other side because there's no extra income coming for the government also.
Time forbids me from asking you any other question. I wanted to talk about the silver linings behind every cloud for Morocco, but
we can do that tomorrow.
We can do that tomorrow. And after the program, Business Morning as well. Thank you so much, Ini.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, after taking off from an airfield near the Donbass front line in the Soviet-era helicopter, Ukrainian helicopter pilot Roman Said says he prefers to fly Western models. Now, speaking in an undisclosed location in Donetsk region, the 34-year-old says that Ukraine needs newer attack helicopters and weapon systems to gain advantage over Russia on the battlefield. The Ukrainian armed forces shared footage, it says, showed a helicopter during a combat mission that we're showing you right now, firing rockets onto Russian positions.
So it should be something from the West. I think it will be like decision done at the politician level. Personally, me, I would like to fly the copters, which are popular in other countries who are members of NATO. And copters which were created in big amount, it means they are like checked and they are long in service. So personally, me, I prepare some kind of Black Hawk or Apache. So we do our best using the old munition, but we need new one because Russians use the same copters and they have more than we have them. So we cannot rely on quantity, we should rely on quality. We need new weapon systems, we need new copters. When we do it, we try to modernize our army step by step, but even I'm a pilot and I like my copters, I clearly understand that you cannot win the war using only copters.
And this is where we leave it on our special coverage of Russian invasion. Thanks for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Do have a great day and a great week.